Excellent. Are you all sitting comfortably? Then we shall begin. So firstly, welcome everybody. It's fantastic to see everyone here. My name's Rollo Burgess. I'm part of the partner team at Capco. I lead our post-trade business in the UK, which includes our T+1 work. And it's fantastic to have you all here. We've been working with colleagues from across the market, particularly with the task forces in the UK and in Europe, and with colleagues from Euroclear on organising this event for some months. So it's fantastic to see so many people here today. And before I forget, I'd just like to thank Marina, Anna, Natalie and Ava from our marketing and events team for putting everything together today. Thank you very much. So there's lots of content to get into, lots of meaty and important content for the industry. So I'm not going to detain you too long. I want to cover two things, really. Thing one, Capco, if you don't know us, we're a pure play FS consultancy. There's about 7,500 of us around the world. Industry practitioners working in financial services. We're built to serve the industry. This is exactly what we do, this type of big, complex market transition. So we're really proud and happy to host this event today. If you know us already, great. If you don't, do say hi to some of the Capco people at some of the events, some of the breaks and drinks and stuff later. And we'd love to have a chat. Separately, and moving on. So my personal journey with T+1 in the UK started right back in December 2022, when I started working on the first phase of the task force with Charlie Geffen. I met Andrew shortly afterwards. And as a personal reflection, at that stage of the process, it certainly wasn't clear to me that in a few years' time there'd be such alignment of purpose and intent and approach across the market and across geographical Europe. So I think that's really good, actually. It wasn't inevitable that it be this way, and I think that's quite an achievement. Now, this looks a bit random, but I'll get to it. So I don't know if any of you have ever climbed a big mountain. Probably demographically and statistically, given this audience, there's probably at least someone in the room who has, but if you haven't, when you climb a big mountain, climb a big mountain, right, Giovanni will know what I'm talking about. When you climb a big mountain, you do what's called an alpine start on your summit day, which means you start climbing at about 11 o'clock at night, right? And you get out of your tent or hut or whatever you're in, and you start walking, and it's dark, and it's quite eerie, and it feels quite strange. You're trudging through the night, and all you can see is the light of your head torch on the ground, maybe the heels of the person in front of you, right? And you're walking through the night. It's quite meditative and strange and beautiful, but it's quite a lonely climb. And then there's a wonderful moment at dawn when the sun comes up, and suddenly you can see where you are, and you're high up on the mountain, high on the mountain, above the clouds. So this is a picture. This is not my picture, but I've actually climbed this mountain. This is from a mountain called Cotopaxi in Ecuador. It's a volcano. You can see the conical profile from the shadow there. It's a beautiful moment. I'd like to make 2 points, the reason why I raised this. So thing one, when you're at that stage, you've still got the most technically difficult, physically demanding, potentially dangerous part of the climb ahead of you, right? So there's still miles to go, but you can see your destination and you can see how far you've come. And I kind of think that's a bit like where we're at today. So we're gonna push for the top, and we're going to talk about our testing strategy today. So I'm going to cut into if my clicker works. Good. So we're going to cover lots of content. We've got, in addition to keynotes from Andrew and Giovanni, we've got two sort of deep content panels with the stream leads and other people deeply involved in pulling together the testing strategy that we're launching today. So those are going to be great opportunities for those people to share why the documents and thinking were developed how they were, and to give people a great introduction that people can use to then really work through that approach and figure out what that means for them and their institution. And between the two, we're going to do a fireside chat involving colleagues from ESMA and from the FCA, which will be a great opportunity to hear their reflections. So I think it should be a great afternoon. In addition to that, we've got a decent long break, and then we've got drinks and reception afterwards. And I think as important as any content is the opportunity to share where you're at, mingle, network, talk to people. Because, to use another climbing metaphor, when you climb a mountain, you're all roped together, right? And you either get to the top together or you don't. And that's a bit like what this is like, right? It's an ecosystem, and this is either going to be a successful transition or it isn't. And I think, Andrew, it is now over to you. Very good. So let me move all my... Very good.
So thanks, Rollo, and thanks for arranging today. Thankfully, you can all breathe a sigh of relief. I'm not going to be talking for very long. In fact, I'm going to be very short. Rollo, you're much taller than I am. And I would just take issue with your last comment. There is no question of this transition being not a success. It will be a success, or I shall be very cross, and you don't want to see that. So, as I said, I'll keep my remarks short. I'm only going to say two things. Firstly, the industry asked for this, and secondly, the workstream delivered this, and this was bringing forward the testing plan from the original date that we talked about, which was releasing it at the end of the year, end of this year. And industry said very clearly, that's too late. We need it before then. So we heard, as I said, and we listened. The task force, the work stream, and I'll be embarrassing people shortly, the work stream only started work on this at the end of November. This also included Christmas, and here we are in the back end of March with a fully formed plan for testing, which I think is a remarkable achievement and illustrates well the power of collective thought, because this is the first, it won't be the last, I hope, but this is the first time we have ever had a cross-jurisdictional work stream from the start. We've had independent work streams that we've thrown them together, but this was the first time we had one work stream and they worked collectively together. I'd like to think, and I know this is something Giovanni and I, we have equivalent fever dreams about a future where the UK and the EU can work closely together, and I think our project is a fine example of where that is possible when we are all motivated with the same goal and we abstract the politics out of it. So I'd like to congratulate the work stream on the fine work that they've done. And this is the point where I embarrass them. The people who did all the work are the three leads, which is Alex, Ivan and Charlie, and they were supported by Emma. I don't know where Emma is. She's over there, sitting next to Sarah, almost like we planned that, with also support from Paolo. I don't think Paolo's here, Paolo Carabelli, Tony from Isla and Gregory, who, as I said, were the support team. And without the dedication and the efforts and the hard work of that collective team, we wouldn't have anything to present at this early stage. So I would like to thank them for their efforts and for getting us to this point. And that's basically all I wanted to say, because we're already a little bit behind schedule. If you do have a burning desire to talk to me, I need to leave straight after the coffee break. So if you, I will be spending most of the coffee break hiding in the toilet to avoid having to talk to anyone. But if you do have a burning issue, you can always collar me at some point in the coffee break. So enjoy the day. I think the content is fantastic. I had the pleasure of reading the final report at the end of last week. It's very concise, it's very readable, and it's very doable. I would encourage you all to read it and to, as I have said, what is it I say? In the words of Winston Churchill, it's action this day. In the words of me, it's get on with it. Do it now. The clock's ticking. So I will leave you to the first panel, which helpfully has vanished from that, so I don't know who's on it. Rachel, you're going to be the moderator. I'm going to leave you to it. If I fall off the stage, no laughing. At least until I've left. For us. Where do you
Thank you. Yes. All right. break that thing. Not that scary. Someone could sit here. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. A few remarks before we get started. T1 is often described as a settlement change, but in reality, as we know, it's much broader. It's a fundamental shift in how our industry operates, compressing timelines and driving tighter level of coordination across the entire trade lifecycle. What makes this moment particularly significant is that we're seeing a truly coordinated effort across the UK and EU markets. That's not just a regulatory milestone, it's an industry one. Success here, of course, depends on individual firm readiness, but more specifically, how well we move together as an ecosystem. And that's why today's discussion matters. We have representation from both the buy side, the sell side, UK, and EMEA, because T1 is not owned by any single group. The challenges cut across the front office, operations, technology, custodians, FMIs, and counterparties. No one solves this in isolation. And that's why the testing strategy is so important. It's not just about system readiness. It's about the end-to-end connectivity across firms, across markets, and under real conditions. With that, let me start by saying a big thank you and a very warm welcome to our panelists today. Charlie, Yvonne, James, and Susan, thank you. Charlie, I'm going to start by coming to you. To start us off, the testing plan is a joint EU and UK industry document. From your perspective on the task force, why was it so important that the industry produced a coordinated testing strategy rather than separate regional approaches?
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for having me. I suppose before I come to the question, the first point is everything is titled up T+1 Settlement. I work for the UK CSD, Euroclear UK and International, and let's be honest, this change has very little to do with settlement. It has a lot to do with everything that happens post-trade up until the moment the settlement instruction is sent in. So the big challenge is in the post-trade area. The title is settlement, but actually there isn't necessarily a huge amount that's going to be changing in the process of settlement. When we look at one plan, I suppose the leading light was the US. The DTCC produced a testing plan for their move to T+1 in 2024, and that in a way gave us almost like a benchmark, a base to start working from. But that plan was looking at one CSD, one CCP, a few markets. When we looked at the UK and EU, we've got, okay, in the UK, we've got a few markets, 3 or 4 CCPs, one CSD, and in the EU, then we go into the range of big numbers. We're sort of looking at 26, 27 different markets, all with different CCPs and such like. So there was a thought we could perhaps have 2 different documents, maybe more than 2 different documents. But on the other hand, the people who would be reading those, let's say 3 documents, would be the same people. Everybody would be reading 3 documents because the big firms and numerous firms are active in the UK and the EU markets. And I read a lot of documents. I do not want to read 3 documents that are pretty much the same, dealing with the same sort of things if I can help it. And so the challenge to the market, as I said, is not the settlement piece, it's the post-trade piece. And let's be honest, it really doesn't matter which market you're in. You've got pretty much the same problem. I think very early in the process, Citibank came out with the metrics that you're losing 80% of your processing time in the move from T+2 to T+1. That affects people who are just in the UK, people who are just in an EU market, or people that are across both. And having one single testing document is really addressing that fact. It's not the fact that there's lots and lots of different markets behind, because it doesn't really matter which market you're in. The impact on you is maybe subtly different depending on the market, but is basically the same. You've got to do what you do in 2 days in basically 20% of the operational time. So I think that's the driver. That was the obvious driver for having one single report. And also, when you look at this, the alignment of having one single report makes it more efficient for you, our customers, whether you're a customer of the CCPs, the CSDs, or whatever. You can align. You can, when you read the report, and as we will discuss, in the coming time, there's alignment. You'll be able to do testing in more than one market at the same time, so it becomes efficient for you to test. Having numerous different test plans undoubtedly would not be harmonised in timelines and such like, and so that just adds more complexity to what is an already complex change.
Thanks, Charlie. I think it's really, excuse me, that helps to set out the intention. Thank you very much. Diving into sort of more around the purpose of the testing strategy. James, coming to you. There's already implementation roadmaps from the UK Accelerated Taskforce, the EU T+1 Industry Committee. What role does this testing strategy play alongside those plans, and what gap was it designed to fill?
Thank you very much, and pleasure to be here. And first of all, I'd like to say a big thank you to the chairs of the working group, who were excellent, and a big thank you, I'd say it to Sarah for the report that she did. So getting to the question, well, it fills a visibility and a coordination gap that was evident once we produced the recommendations for T+1. So the report aims to provide end-to-end visibility for the test. Whoops. For the better. It's gone. It's okay. So it aims to provide visibility, end-to-end visibility for the participants, with the who is supposed to be testing, when the testing is supposed to take place, and what to test during these phases, these five phases. So the report goes into detail in listing who should be testing at the industry level. What we went to look at the description of the trade life cycle to understand where people could perform testing. And this was often a question even Andrew asked me, what do you want to test? And that was something the working group really sort of discussed to try and understand what part of the flow we wanted to test. And then there's obviously, the second part was measurement of readiness of the industry for T+1. And when we discussed this in the working group to try and find a measure of readiness, it was, people had different measurements to declare themselves as ready, be it my matching time, my settlement efficiency, I'm doing my allocations before. So the industry wants, the working group wanted to come up with these metrics and discussed it with the FMIs to try and produce metrics, readiness metrics, which were measurable across the community. And therefore, people will be able to de-risk their transition to T+1 and have a level of measurability as to what the industry is actually performing today.
Thanks, James. Really helpful. I think switching gears slightly, Yvonne, let me come to you. Help us understand more around the testing philosophy. So the document sets out several guiding principles, including the idea that firms should start testing now, and we heard that from Andrew as well, rather than waiting for the formal market testing windows. Why was that such an important message for the industry?
Well, that's a legitimate question, Rachel. Indeed, T+1 launch the top of the mountain to take your image is only far away, 1.5 years away. So it looks like, why rush? Yet the working group, as we progressed, started to realize that this was not about a mountain, it was an iceberg. What you see is only a little piece of it. And there is so much to do that we came up with this view that we formed this view on 2026 is absolutely necessary. And let me maybe elaborate on it. On the one side, you could say, you know what, T+1 is nothing really new. It's just about a compressed timeline, fair. But as you said, Charlie, that compressed timeline can be up to 80%. And so it's not about just making the same faster. It's about doing something potentially different. And when you look at the EU high-level roadmap, that it doesn't say anything else when it tells and recommends about 30 changes across the chain. And so T+1 is really about, and it was already said a few times, and I like the word, it's really not about optimizing, it's about reshaping. And the illustration of, the best illustration for me of that is the full rethinking that had to be done from a timeline point of view, and that's how the market came up with the, at least on the EU side, with the new operational day. Now, another thing that I think was important for us to pass as a message is we all look at T+1 is October 2027. Well, it isn't. That's the launch. But T+1 is a journey. And there are a number of milestones, including regulatory milestones, that will get implemented before, well before. And I'll give you 2 examples. I mentioned about the new operational day. T2S will implement that new operational day sometime in mid-June 2027. So don't get ready for October. The systems will run in that new time frame as from June. Going even earlier, the ESMA, and that's we're getting to regulatory matters, ESMA has made proposals to change the settlement regime, the settlement discipline regime, which would call for firms to complete their affirmation and confirmation process by 11 p.m. Don't ask me what the time is today. It's fundamentally different. And guess what? It happens on 26th of December, 2026. Kind of a Christmas gift. So anyone's believing that working on it to be ready by October 2027 is taking a substantial risk of missing some of the important matters. And when you combine that there is a lot to do with some that come early, working on 2027 milestones is probably a recipe for failing to make it happen. And as, if you allow me 1 more minute, 30 seconds. No, but it was said, this is an ecosystem. This is not about some of us could fail. I'm not talking about the very small firms, but if some of the mid or sizable firms miss it, it's the ecosystem that will bear the cost of the failure. So we have a duty all together to take this very seriously, and that's why our call for 2026 is so important. And in fact, maybe you could show there was an extract that I took from the survey run by the, it doesn't work? Yes, it is. This is, you may have seen the survey that was run by Value Exchange. Don't try to go and have a look at all the details. Look just at the title. It says that 71% of people are getting ready for testing in 2027. Well, that means that the regulatory change that I mentioned will be missed. So, long story short, what I guess I'm trying to say is this is a fundamental reshaping. There is a lot to do, and some of it will come way before end 27. There will, in fact, be a new survey. So readiness, and you've used, James, the word of readiness, and metrics, we'll talk about it later on, are important. Getting reassurance that the market overall is ready is so important. And so as an industry, the intent is to run a second run of this readiness poll, or not poll, survey soon, probably in Q2.
Yeah, be on the lookout for that. I think we thought, thank you very much, Yvonne, really, really insightful. As Yvonne said, that's coming soon from our friends at Value Exchange. In the meantime, we thought that this would be a good opportunity to just do an informal poll with the audience. So if my clicker works, there we go. If you guys can take out your phones, we thought it'd be really interesting just to get a pulse check now in terms of when do you expect to have completed your work on automation and system changes on the development of associated with T+1. Hopefully most people have used a Slido before, but you just scan the QR code or go to Slido and enter the code that's on the poll. We'll give people a moment to do that. I think while they're doing that, Charlie, I'm interested in your opinion on this. So the strategy, interested in your opinion, diving into the testing philosophy a bit more. I think the strategy deliberately avoids prescribing an exhaustive set of testing requirements for every firm. We know that was the intention. How did the task force go about balancing providing clear guidance while allowing firms that flexibility to operate within their own parameters?
Yes, I mean, as I said before, nobody wants to read a massive testing document and go through each page and have to tick off lots of stuff. The point of the report is really to empower you as firms and to empower all the firms involved, as we've been saying, in the ecosystem, because everyone is different. There are lots of people doing lots of trades, and when you look at it, they're all trading on exchange, etc. But the reason for the change, the way they process, the reason for the trade, the way they process those trades is different in every little place. When you look at special sort of types of transactions, so stock lending and such like, there are different reasons why people are doing stock lending, and the way they process internally their particular brand, shall we say, of stock loans is different across the piece. And there is no way, unless you were expecting to see the Encyclopedia Britannica, 26 volumes, everything all covered up, and lots of tick boxes, there's no way we could ever have an exhaustive test. We've got to take, the ecosystem, the clients of the FMIs, you've got to stand up. This is going to affect all of you. You've got to take responsibility for understanding the changes that are happening in your neck of the woods, shall we say, in your business, and test what you're changing. Because there will be some things that you're probably not going to change. There will be some things that work. And when we come to discuss a little bit later about metrics, when you look at the metrics, you may well be hitting timelines that are commensurate with a T+1 environment. Well, I would not saying you shouldn't change things in that area, but look at the places where you're well behind the curve, because that's the areas that you're going to fall down on when we move to T+1. So it was designed to assist firms with thinking about where they need to do the testing. It's very easy, at the beginning when we were having our first discussions, the first thing was testing. We've got to test everything, basically everything, everywhere, all at once. And that was you would never get it in before October 2027. So we've given the flexibility to all the firms, and we've deliberately structured it so that there is this flexibility. There are industry testing slots, but there's, as Yvonne was saying, start testing now. There are things you can test and improve without affecting any of the FMIs. It's purely in your internal processing, and you can get changes made to be a T+1 compliant place. But when we get to that industry-wide testing piece, then if you feel you need it, use it. or test bilaterally with another firm, because that's what it's there for. But don't think that we can ever come up with a complete set of tests that is very specific to your own businesses, and I think that's what's come across in the test plan.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Let's check on the poll, see how people are feeling. Ooh. So 57%, maybe the data's still coming in, but 57% are saying they're going to be completed in 2027 and only 36 in 2026. So I think up slightly, Yvonne, but what does the panel think about this? How are your tummies at the minute?
Well, what the poll doesn't say, if it's January 2027, it's okay. And you'll see, we had a lot of discussion in the group. Initially, we were only tasked, the market-wide testing windows that we had provided for, initially had the plan to start only sometime in April, when we got a call from quite a few members to say, guys, this is too late, because if we find problems, we need time to resolve. And that's how we came with windows that are starting us from February. So that's why I'm choosing January as an important time, is be ready. Now, this is online. What I hope will happen today is the call for urgency will be heard, and we'll get the message through the entities to work and check whether their plan is still the right ones.
It's the people in D that I'm more concerned. They are the person, perhaps, as he looks around the room. Anybody want to put their hand up? That's the challenge. But yes, certainly try and if we could reduce the number in 2027 and boost the number in 2026, I think that will be a good move forward.
What this doesn't tell neither is this is about completing. And that for many of us, some will have to be done in 2027. What is important is, and you said it, Charlie, it's not about doing everything in 2026. It is about doing as much as possible in 26 to be able to focus 27 to the market-wide testing.
Yeah, clearly a lot of wood to chop still.
Yes.
Excellent. So we've talked a little bit about the intention of the document. We've talked around the strategy, the philosophy. Let's shift gears now a little bit and talk about the structure. So the testing framework is built around a number of building blocks. They're complementary, and they aim to combine the needs across the UK and the various EU markets. Yvonne, let me come to you again on this one. Can you give us a high-level view of the framework and what the building blocks will allow us to test?
Okay. Yes, which brings us to the logistics of the testing. And okay, you have the slide projected that will help me explain the building blocks. Now, when we worked with the team we had quite a few iterations before landing with this, but basically we've landed with 3 big pillars. First one, and most important one at the beginning, is about, at the end of the day, we are in an ecosystem. We will all depend on each other. There is a long chain between trade to net to clearing up to settlement. There is a need for everyone in the chain to upscale their internal processes, to run the full transaction cycle within the compressed timeline. This is essentially about automating internal processes, but it is also about leveraging tools that are available in the market that allow to facilitate settlement in a compressed timeline. And as an example, I would take a partial settlement. Many CSDs or other entities are offering partial settlement, but it is not used by all clients. And when it is used, it may not be used at full scale. So there is a need to first upgrade internal. And that's what we have tried to sketch in this slide by what I call the blue period at the top. And as you can see, it starts now. As Charlie said, there are so many things that are about your own internal processes that can be tested. Hence, this blue period testing, which is starting now in 2026. Waiting for 2027 is recipe for having problems. 2027 is the second pillar. 2027 is what we hope people will be able, having done their internal upgrades, they will be able to leverage the 5 testing windows that are represented by the vertical bars, columns that you see on the screen, from February up to the September 2027. And the idea there is to secure that there is a mechanism whereby all testing providers, all FMIs, will be expected to provide a test environment simultaneously. The aim is simple. It is to leverage what was said before about, I am a firm operating in many markets. I want to be able to set up my test and run them simultaneously across the different markets. And it's not only about geographies, it's also the importance of having these windows where all FMIs and testing providers provide test environment at the same time is also to facilitate the life of us all, you all, to run a transaction cycle from trade to clearing up to settlement. And you see, Pillar 1 is about internal processes. Pillar 2 is about a market-wide testing. There is a third one, which is what we've represented at the bottom with the green period, which is specific to the EU. I mentioned earlier on that the EU will be moving to a new operational day. This will come into life, as I said, in the middle of 2027. And so we've arranged within the task force, but together with the support of T2S, which have done a great job to adapt their plans and their implementation plan to provide testing capabilities to the market to be able to test not only T+1 as a process, but the new operational day as from, I think, April next year.
Really helpful to see it laid out like this, and I'm sure the room would agree as well. Thank you. Susan, I'd like to bring you into the conversation. I'm really interested in your point of view. So as Yvonne just outlined for us, the testing plan has several pillars. Firms, as he said, firms optimizing their internal processes, leveraging FMI capabilities, and then participating in market-wide testing. How do you think that firms should think about their own internal testing plans?
Okay, so firstly, thank you very much for having me. Really happy to be here representing the buy side. And I don't think Andrew did a good enough job embarrassing the authors, so I'd like to do that. I really do think the testing plan is a fantastic report. I mean, it's highly readable, highly actionable, particularly for people who are, less on the technical side. And I think, I certainly hope those of us who are also joining online will pick it up and read it and, call to action, I think, for all. So in answer to your question, I'm not hugely surprised with the poll results, with so much in 27, even though we're talking about completing. This is something that's getting underway. I've had some discussions with my members. And so in answer to your question, I think certainly the focus is now on optimizing internal processes. And when we look across the changes that are coming, that are captured in the high-level roadmap, but are also coming along in the new RTS, so new settlement discipline standards, there's quite a lot there. And there isn't, like, for a buy-side firm, you don't pick and choose. As you said, we're all, highly integrated, and, if one player in the chain isn't doing the right thing, then there's repercussions beyond that. So I think certainly for the buy side as well, you have to look across the breadth of what's changing in the operational day, but also the outputs of these, these additional work streams that got away at the end of, around Q4 last year. So I'm thinking principally of the SFT gating event, operationalizing the auto partials, SSI instructions that are, much more granular and sort of additional fields there. So I think we have to look across the pieces by side. There's a direct impact for us, because if we fail to do that, there's an impact on our cash management, our cash forecasting, and also I think ultimately on settlement fails. So that's kind of the, the bigger sort of mission or brief. What I can tell you is that maybe 8 months ago we surveyed our members, and so it was reassuring in that a lot of the activities are taking place way before the various cutoffs, so way before the 2300 for the allocation confirmation, and then the settlement instructions beyond that. So there's a lot of intraday happening already today. Maybe not so true for those funds that invest, that are passive, right? So that are doing, tracking indices and so on, and the ETFs, they trade end of day, so they'll obviously have a little less time. But certainly the behavior is that we're already leveraging a lot on the intraday and batches. And of course that reduces operational risk and allows you to have some time still within T0 to address any issues. And then maybe, I feel like it's early days, so there may be, this is the whole point of this, is we may uncover areas where there are issues and hopefully we can address them collectively. But one kind of early area, and I don't think it'll shock anyone, is this kind of gulf between the larger asset managers who are already highly automated and who, frankly don't see a lot of issues and, maybe a few updates and a few, additional fields and so on that they have to think about. And then this other segment, which is highly manual today, and they're not necessarily, and I think all the various surveys prove this, they're not in a position to make decisions about, investing and having a matching engine and sort of going for a full-scale automated solution. So that, for me, is the big kind of problem area that we need to think about and have better visibility on how big they are and sort of, how well the manual workarounds will work for them for a certain time until they're able to secure, budget, and that could come later. And I believe that's what happened on the US T1 as well, where, the automation wasn't immediate and it came much after. But that's kind of the high-level view of where we are as by side.
Thank you very much. I think lots to think about, for sure. Switching gears slightly, I think we've spent a lot of time, and it's very, very clear that this really is an ecosystem. We've used that word a lot. There's a lot of collaboration. But there is some nuance between the EU and the UK. So I guess, James and Charlie, I'm interested in your opinion here. So the document's clearly a joint document. It's a joint EU and UK testing strategy, but there are some important structural differences between the markets, particularly around the EU's new operational day. I think, Susan, you just mentioned as well, the gating event. What do you think firms should be most aware of in considering these nuances?
Shall I go first?
Yeah, sure.
I think there are structural differences, and in a way it goes back in history, because within the UK we're operating real-time settlement. Gilts, which is the main fixed income traded and settled through the CSD, are already on a T+1 settlement cycle. So in the UK we are looking at equities, and so it becomes perhaps a little more straightforward in the UK. It doesn't mean it's any less work, but it's a bit more, shall we say, defined. When we look into the EU, and defer to James on this, but basically it's sort of everything. It's equities, it's all the fixed income, etc. So there's a much bigger change in the EU. And so from the UK perspective, we recognising that from the initial reports coming out, and there being a single date when the EU and UK is going to move, 11th of October 2027, unless anybody's forgotten it, just in case, you never know. That if we can get our stuff done, the changes that we need to make in the UK from a CSD perspective, that early, then it frees up a lot of time for our significant clients, who are also bizarrely significant clients in the EU. So it sort of frees them up to concentrate and be able to really work on all of the different changes within the EU. So that's sort of, from a UK perspective, that was, even before the test plan, that was our driver, was to let's get things in early, because there's a lot of work to do for the EU, James.
A lot of work to do for the EU, but I think the EU and the UK share the same overreaching goals, to automate and to ensure harmonised transfer and to start testing from now. That's for sure. Now, the UK is not changing. You are extending your opening hours a little bit, so thank you very much for that. If you can push them out a little bit more.
That's out for consultation at the moment.
Consultation.
So, there you go, please answer.
But I'll go into some details so that maybe give some ideas to people around what is possible in the testing environment with the European change to the timetable, which is a dramatic change, because and one probably that not everybody's noticed is that today the settlement cycle, nighttime settlement cycle, starts at T+1 at 8 p.m. And runs consecutive two nighttime settlement cycles, so 2 netting cycles. There's no gap in between those two today, which doesn't allow for settlement messages to be sent to settlement intermediaries. Tomorrow, and this is the great work that was done on the timetable, the settlement will start at midnight. The first settlement starts at midnight, and there will be a pause after 1 hour to allow those settlement messages to go. So previously, a lot of our settlements were actually frozen because of a lack of securities that were coming in, for example, from a CCP. So they weren't settling in the nighttime settlement cycle. With this pause that Europe is putting in place, it should allow for much greater settlement overnight, and therefore it's very important that people prepare for this change and start instructing very early for the transfers or the realignments between the different markets, because it will allow you to settle overnight, which is a very big change. The second one, Susan referred to it, is the new gating event, the new SFT gating event, which has been introduced. So the gating event is basically a new CSD-driven event that's going to look to net, match, and increase the liquidity on certain flagged transactions, because you'll need to flag a transaction to get into it. The CSD will run this in Europe and not in the UK at 11 o'clock every single day. And if your transaction actually settles does not settle in that cycle, it will just naturally fall into the RTS cycle. So the conditions there, it's an optional condition to participate in this gating event. There's a requirement to use a new SWIFT flag, which will be delivered in 2026. So again, something else to be testing for the new events in 2027. And it most notably concerns repo transactions. So those are some sort of very concrete examples of what people can be testing when going into for the changes that the EU are bringing into place in T+1 2027.
Really useful, and I think everyone will appreciate the concrete examples for sure. Susan, lots to digest here. Looking ahead, as we move through 2026 and towards the coordinating testing windows in 2027, what should firms be prioritizing?
Well, I think we already said everything. But to qualify that a little bit, I think there are a few areas that I think are kind of coming into focus. And again, I think this will evolve. as hopefully we get more feedback from the buy side and we're aware of what they're doing internally. But a few points that I can mention today. One is around new cutoffs for custodians. So 2,300, I think when you look at the larger custodians, you expect that to be, maybe 45 minutes before the actual cutoff is when the custodian cutoff will be towards their clients. But if you're looking at a smaller custodian, that could come much earlier in the operational day, so it could come around 9 or 10 in the evening. And again, so for the asset manager, they have to be aware of their whole universe of custodians and what are the different cutoffs that they're facing, given that the smaller guys don't have a follow the sun model and they don't have the same operational capabilities. So I think that's one important thing to keep track of. Another issue that comes up, again it's more relevant to certain markets, is where the buy side outsources the majority of the post-trade operations. And there I think it's more a question of due diligence and conversations to be had with the custodian to understand, will you be able to implement these changes as they come in or as we migrate to T1. And then I think another area that I'm happy to share here is on the SSIs and the PSAF. And the feedback I've already had, so if I'm saying anything, it's a great initiative. I think all these things will certainly help in terms of settlement efficiency. There seems to be a little confusion, so I think we need to have more communication towards the buy side. What are the additional fields? How do we upgrade our instructions, to really hit the PSAF field and sort of know where it's coming from and what we're passing on in our settlement instructions. And then finally, I think, I wouldn't do the buy side justice if I didn't mention fund settlement cycles as well. And I think to the extent that many asset managers are, amending their fund settle cycles from T3 or T2 to, 1 or 2 less days, that's something that potentially has to run in parallel to the testing for the security settlement. So I think that's an added challenge and a complexity that comes. Yeah, and then I think, again, throughout 2026, while it's not the focus, firms can, test market-wide. They can, with friendly brokers, friendly custodians, they can start to do some of that testing.
Excellent. So, as we said, get started now and lots to do. Final question for each of you. If you just want the room and those joining us online to take one message away from today, what would it be? Yvonne, if we start with you and maybe go down.
Okay, well, won't be a surprise on my side. I hope that one of the non-subliminal message that is getting through this panel is time is of essence. Time is of essence. There is a lot to do. It's big change. It's reshaping. Start now.
Thank you.
For me, it would be, while we are a trade association, so presumably we speak for the whole industry, we have our weak points too. I would love to hear more from the smaller asset managers and truly understand the challenges that they're facing. Sorry?
So would I.
There's your call. Your open invite.
Yeah, from my perspective, which may be a bit off-piste, I suppose, is the old adage, a rising tide raises all ships, and we're all in this together. I think that's sort of come clear in this panel. And whilst in business, we're all, you're all competitors, you're all doing, shall we say, pretty much the same thing, but trying to do it better than the other person and win business. At the end of the day, when you look at the way trades work, it's through chains, and the only way that the efficient, from the buy side or the sell side, the efficient movement of all of this information that's going to happen in this short period of time is if you communicate with each other, talk to each other, so that you understand what your main clients, what the main custodians use, what they're working on and what they're doing. Because if somebody further down the chain is purely working to deadlines, I'm pretty certain that somebody further up the chain is going to get stiffed because it just ain't going to work. And so you really need, throughout the whole industry, communication between firms to really understand what's happening.
Thank you. James?
So this is a joint report by the UK and the EU, but there are still, it doesn't mean that overall the T+1 project has merged between the EU and the UK. So there's recommendations that are UK specifics, and there's recommendations that are EU specifics, and try to put this in to the testing working document. Now, it's published, this document, but it's not the end of the work, and that's where it's really important to understand. There's a lot of industry work to be done through trade associations, with the custodians, with the sell side and buy side, to build those test cases that are required. And there's some very complex testing that still needs to happen, especially around corporate actions, I'm thinking, with multi-listed stocks across the CSDs in the UK, in Europe, and Switzerland. Here we can push Switzerland into this discussion. And those working groups have to start very quickly for everybody to be ready in 2027 to test. So the first milestone is done, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
Lots to go. Excellent. Thank you very much. Let's hear it for our panel. We're going to pause briefly for a tea and coffee break. If everyone can come back to the room and online for 3:30, please.
Hi everyone. I think there might be a few stragglers still to come back in from the refreshments, but they don't know what they're missing. Right, let's get going. Before we get started with what's going to be a really interesting panel, I have a quick public service announcement. It's a slight correction to what might have been a slightly misleading earlier statement. Just to be clear, the EU Switzerland engagement survey is live now, closing on the 2nd of April. So if you haven't already completed it, you please go and do so. Do that. Links are available via our document, via LinkedIn Industry Association. So please do. It's important that the industry has good data. So it'd be great if people can do that. Good. And now we're going to come to our next panel, where we're joined with we're joined by colleagues from ESMA and from the FCA. So Caroline Sauvé-Frott and Heather Pilley. I'll let you guys introduce yourself quickly when you first start talking, and then we can probably get right on with things. So I guess this event is about launching a joint EU-UK testing document, and a lot of time was spent in the first panel on talking about why that's important. I guess from your perspective, how important is it that the regulators and the industry across all the relevant jurisdictions are aligned and working towards the same outcome? And I think Caroline will come first to you with that question, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for having me, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Caroline Sauvé-Frott. I'm working at ESMA for 10 years now in the post-trading sector and coordinating the T+1 work we are conducting at ESMA with the Commission, with the ECB, with the national authorities in Europe, etc., and the Industry Committee, of course. On this question of coordination, given the interconnectedness between the markets of the UK and the EU, it's a question that came very early in our works, like when we conducted this call for evidence at ESMA in end 2023, 2024. It was one of the major concerns that came out from the EU market participants, that we need to coordinate with the UK, with the Switzerland, throughout the whole European area to ensure a smooth transition to T+1, because it was not even a question to move at different paces in this area. So it's really something that we very much welcome, this joint work of the EU, UK, and Swiss task force now, and we hope it's gonna continue indeed to work toward exactly this outcome of moving swiftly to T+1. So, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So Heather, coming to you. The EU and the UK are often described kind of as having different approaches from a regulatory perspective, crudely a rules-based and a principles-based approach. Do you want to comment a bit on how those approaches complement each other and reinforce each other, or how that works in terms of pursuing the same overall objective?
Thank you, Rollo. And thank you as well for having me. I have been at the FCA for a number of years and worked on a variety of initiatives. Ellie McCormick, who's here today, and I lead on our FCA T+1 work. And I just wanted to add, first of all, to Carol Ann's comments that we felt it was critical that we all work together, the EU, Switzerland, and ourselves, because the jurisdictions are inextricably interlinked and connected. The EU and the UK are sometimes characterized as taking a different approach. Since Brexit, we did not onshore some of the settlement discipline parts of the CSDR. I think the important point to emphasize is we are all aiming for the same outcomes, and that is the crucial part. The CSDR in the EU and the CSDR in the UK will broadly be aligned. And the one point that I want to make very clear is our non-rules-based approach, our more principles-based approach, does not impede us from taking action where we see a threat to market integrity.
No, indeed, and it's indeed very, quite different in the EU because we are 27 jurisdictions and we need to coordinate everyone. So we need somewhat a framework, maybe a bit more constraining, let's say, with different levels of tools. And for T+1, we're using all the tools, basically level 1, level 2, level 3. We're working a lot also with the authorities to actually now. Level 2 is almost finished. We're trying to define also the supervisory expectations for the enforcement of the implementation of the RTS and settlement discipline, which will start on 7th of December 2026, not 26th of December, I have to say. And we're really trying to mobilize every tool that we have to make T+1 work basically across all jurisdiction and also with all the national authorities to see what actions need to be coordinated at EU level, but also actions that need to be conducted at national level because that's where the contact with the market participants is. So different approaches, but basically the same outcome is indeed searched for.
Cool, thank you. And I mean, we saw some interesting data earlier that was generated by Value Exchange last year. And, you know, we've already discussed that. I mean, I think there is a clear sense that momentum's building across the industry, which is positive. But at the same time, the level of focus is clearly patchy. It's a bit of a mixed picture across the street. So, I mean, Heather, coming to you, how do you kind of interpret that picture? What's your reaction seeing those data?
Yes, the data is mixed. And I think we're looking in particular at the Q3 value exchange surveys done both in the EU and the UK. And they showed some similarities. And I'm going to call out a key concern and a bit of good news. The key concern was that there were a sizable number of respondents that said that they expected not to achieve compliance with completing allocations and confirmations by the trade date. And that is the recommendation in the AST report. That is, I think, an RTS requirement in the EU, or will be. And they are both scheduled to be done by the end of 2026, or roughly the end of 2026. And people are saying that does not look like it may be met. So that's the bad news. On the other hand, there was positive news that there are very few participants, at least those who answered the survey, that have done no activity in terms of T+1. And remember, that was some time ago. Those surveys are now a bit dated. For this year, we at the FCA and Carol Ann might have expressed views in the EU, but I suspect we will have the same broad focus. We are expecting firms to be implementing the changes that they have contemplated in their project plans now this year in order to be able to test work next year. Now, in interpreting that the data on readiness with some of the objectives, we here in the UK through the FCA will be focusing on small to medium asset managers who may be less ready for the transition. And some of you may have seen we published a Dear CCO letter to those firms to remind them of our expectations. We'll also be focusing on those recommendations, including the one I gave as an example, the allocations confirmations, those recommendations which are supposed to be done this year and completed this year. And this year as well, we are going to be taking a more intrusive approach when we go out to talk to our supervised firms. We will be wanting them to demonstrate to us where they are in their preparations. And we are likely to be more concerned than we were last year if we find evidence that they aren't preparing sufficiently for T+1, and we'll consider whether we need to take action.
Excellent.
It's quite also we have also the same kind of focus on the EU side. It's true that through the survey that Value Exchange conducted, we also saw this big concern about the firms saying they won't be ready for end of 2026 for allocations and confirmations, with the additional constraint in the EU that this will become a regulatory requirement soon. So there's really a need to communicate more, I think, on this in the EU at least. The other areas of concern that we identified was the preparations at smaller firms level, in particular in the sectors of investment management and also insurance companies appeared in this by side basically, and smaller firms in terms of preparation, in terms of liaising with the IT service provider. We saw that there was very little action that had been conducted so far, so that needs to be accelerated, all this work. The other areas of concern that we saw was there was a big concern of dependencies on other firms, and depending on your spot in the chain, to custodians to FMIs, and maybe there was a need for more transparency on the level of preparedness of an implementation of changes, and also testing plans of those major actors of the trading and settlement chain, maybe. So that's where we're trying to focus our attention now, and we'll also try with next survey to come to maybe get more precise idea about what exactly are the issues that we need to be working on more in the coming months. Great.
And so, I mean, I guess your message to firms that are behind or haven't started with their preparations yet, what would that?
Start now, don't wait, clearly, and really identify what are the needs, what are the regulatory, maybe if there is something to prioritize, what are the regulatory requirements that apply to you, and will you implement them, liaise with your counterparties, your clients, challenge them, challenge your providers to see what can be done to help you move to T+1 more quickly.
Excellent. Thank you. Coming back to you, Heather, I mean, what do you think is the biggest risk to a successful transition? When you look at all the work that's being done across and where we are and where we aren't, what do you think is the biggest risk that keeps you worried?
Well, the biggest single threat is probably that lack of preparedness, which is what we have talked about. I wanted to, perhaps, if I may, just talk a bit of data and evidence. This comes from the US transition and deals with automation. And in particular, it appears to show that firms that invested more in automation faced lower long-term operating costs than firms that did not make that investment and instead relied on increased staff headcount. So, for example, and this comes from a Value Exchange report that was published after the US transition, the top tier firms on average saw more automation, and they had a 6% increase in out-of-hours staffing costs and a 2% decrease in trade fails, while boutique firms had less automation a higher increase in staff costs and an increase rather than a decrease in settlement fails. So I think that participants in T+1 should view the change and the move as being an opportunity to change your processes, and in particular to automate your processes so they are more efficient.
No, indeed, it's the same kind of constraint that we have in the EU, and also the risk that if you don't automate, basically you will force to get out of the market, because people won't want to trade with you anymore if you don't have the efficiency that is necessary to reach a good settlement efficiency level. So the risk there is mostly for the participants that will not be prepared early enough for T+1.
Yeah, absolutely. That I remember. I mean, I remember that stat when it came out about the US market. I found that very telling too. We've talked to clients about that quite a bit. Caroline, coming back to you again, I mean, how do you see the settlement discipline mechanisms working and feeding into a T+1 environment in our journey?
So the first thing is that if we take the US example, that there was no spike of settlement fails around the move to T+1 in the US. So that's clearly what also we aim at achieving in the EU. And there is a possibility for the Commission to suspend the cash penalties that is embedded in the text, and there is this in the level 1 change that occurred in October. There is a reminder of that, and the fact that the Commission will monitor settlement fails, etc., to decide. But clearly, nothing is decided yet, and this is really not something to be expected at this stage, that there will be a suspension of cash penalties around the move to T+1. It's clearly, I guess, an incentive also for the market to be prepared in time, not to incur additional costs due to cash penalties. So, yeah, at this stage, that's all we can say about it. It's there.
Thank you. Good. I think we've landed the key and very important message, which is if you haven't started, start now. So I think now we should have a little bit of fun. So when we started, right back, as I recall being involved in the early stages of this process, a lot of people wanted to talk about T+0 and same-day settlement. And everyone was very disciplined in trying to keep the discussion on track and focus on T+1. But I mean, there is still discussion about that topic, and it does still come up, and it is obviously salient in terms of what's going on globally and with other asset classes and innovation across the industry generally. I mean, staying with you, Caroline, for a minute, from your perspective, is that a realistic future direction? What would need to happen for us to get there, do you think?
So it's something that seems to be a direction of travel. However, something that should be noted is that when we did also our call for evidence, so 24, but the idea was that unanimously the market participants said we were not ready at all to move to T0. That also, what was T0 exactly? Is it like settling on the same trading date in different batches, in one batch at the end of the day? Is it atomic settlement? So there is first I need to work on the definition of what T0 would be. And then when we have decided, it's still, the consequences will be very different, right? Because if we move to atomic settlement, it's like a complete shift, change, transformation of the market structure itself. So there is still a lot of work to be done, at least on the EU side. T+0 exists already for certain, and also in the EU, T+0 exists for certain asset classes. So, and it's a possibility for CSDs, but to make it mandatory, as we're making T+1 mandatory for transferable securities, that is a step that will need some more thinking and assessment and analysis. But we already have some moves on the DLT side, like we have the DLT pilot regime in the EU. We have already 6 DLT market infrastructures that were authorized. There are 10 more in the pipeline. So things are moving and going there. But yeah, to make it mandatory, that's another step that we haven't taken yet. But it's still to be seen.
And just before we go to the more fun bits, I just wanted to point out, and I think everyone knows this, is that EUI CREST has its own settlement discipline system. So just to go to the T+0, we see it as an evolution-revolution distinction. So the move from T+2 to T+1 is largely an evolution. It can be achieved basically using available systems and processes. But T+0, and I appreciate that there would be different kinds of T+0, but broadly, it could lead to challenges for which there are no real post-trade solutions necessarily available now. Challenges in terms of liquidity, challenges in how it would deal with securities lending. It really would be quite a different system. And we in the UK have our digital security sandbox, and the initiatives that are shown there may provide a way forward to give the processes in due course that may allow something along the lines of a T+0.
Excellent. Good. So I mean, back in T+1 land, sure this is going to go brilliantly. When it's gone well and you're looking back on it, what will that successful transition look like? What will be the characteristics of a successful transition? Do you want to maybe say, Heather, what good looks like?
What good looks like, or what the benefits are. I think that I see four. I think you could stack them in different ways. One is that individually firms will be able to meet their legislative requirements and the requirements that their regulator expects of them. Two, that the overall transition looked at the market runs smoothly. Three, that the T+1 transition increases settlement efficiency. And lastly, that we will see the tangible market-wide benefits that we envisaged, the reduction of risk because the time of settlement takes place more quickly, and otherwise everything that we have talked about in terms of the benefits of shortening the settlement cycle. And I have some other data. This comes also from the US transition. DTCC reported immediately after, or within a couple of days after the move to T+1, a 29% reduction from the previous average quarter value of the NSCC clearing fund. So the clearing requirements had less needed. There was less margin that was needed as a result, and that translated into 3.7 billion in savings. So it's that type of tangible benefit that, amongst other benefits, we look to see.
And in the EU, I will refer to the benefits that we identified in the report on shortening the settlement cycle and why we decided to make it mandatory, or why the Commission and legislators decided to make it mandatory. There was the risk reduction, so same thing, because settlement takes place earlier. There was also the reduction in margin, in CCP margins, for which we did actually simulation, and we hope to see the simulation being validated by the market. So there was an expectation of reducing by 40% the need of collateral daily at CCP level, so that would free up some liquidity and make the market maybe more resilient. That's what we hope. And the last point was to make the market more efficient because of automation will make them more modern and more rapid, more safe, because standardization also would help facilitate settlement and decrease the settlement fails and make settlement efficiency increase. That's also our hope there. And also it would help making the markets in the EU more integrated, which is also working for the greater good of the Savings and Investment Union, on which the EU is also working at the same time. So more integrated capital markets. I mean, overall, that's what we want to see: more efficient, more modern, more attractive markets.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Brilliant. So look, a final question from me. I mean, I guess, if you can land one thought, a single sort of parting shot and thing that you'd like firms to focus on between now and implementation as people go away, what would it be? Just a quick.
One thing possibly that we haven't mentioned, although I appreciate it was mentioned in the previous session, and also your picture of the mountain roller is the idea that T+1 is a network exercise. It's a network effort. And if there's one thing that we suggest you do, if you haven't done it already, is communicate with the others that you deal with in your settlement chain, your clients, your settlement agents, custodians, counterparties, wherever you are, to make sure that you and they are ready for T+1. And participants are only as strong as the weakest in that settlement chain.
I can't say better, but it was the same idea that you need really to communicate with everyone in the settlement chains to find the best solutions for you and implement it as soon as possible, because time is of the essence now.
Perfect. Thank you very much indeed. I think before we applaud, I think we've probably got time for one question. If there's anyone in the room who'd like to ask a question, yes, gentleman here. So I think, if you wait for the microphone, then people online can hear you.
Hello, it's Dowd from Deutsche Bank. So the ask is to ESMA really to reconsider CSDR and the penalties. Because in the earlier panel, we talked about having a soft go live of T+1 earlier than October. So there'll be a period before that where people are going to want to start settling on T+1. So we can, it's almost like a soft launch of T+1. If people are penalised on settling on T+1 under CSDR, then there has no incentive to start early. We'll go on the October date because we know that then we won't be fined. But if you say, okay, if you're going to start, say, 6 months early and say we're going to have this period where we could possibly settle on T+1, then for that period of time, saying anybody who tries, we should not have the penalties if you're trying to settle on T+1. If you settle on T+2 and you fail, then fine. But if it's T+1, then at least that gives firms an incentive to try early and test their systems versus their counterparties, go through the bugs, looking for issues. Testing is fine, but it's in the real production environment that this really needs to be done.
Cool.
So please have a relook at that. That would be great.
Okay. We'll have a look at that. It's the first time I hear about this, so okay.
Great. Well, hey, I was like, it was technically a question, but it was a very clearly expressed point.
Yeah, but that's what I was thinking also. Because if you voluntarily want to settle in T+1 while you should only settle in T+2, so you're going to put it's going to be technical, but you're going to put ISD T+1. Or you're going to just settle one day? How does it? I mean, we need to see how this could work technically, because
it sounds like that's a good takeaway to figure out afterwards. But good. So thank you very much. Thank you for that, and thank you very much indeed to our panelists. Great. And now hold your seats because I'm handing over to Giovanni. Come on.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Rollo, for inviting me today. And, well, let me start by joining Andrew in warmly thank Alex, Ivan, Charlie, Emma, Paolo, and all the members of the task force and the secretariat for the excellent work they have done in delivering in such a short time. My thanks also go to Andrew, who first suggested joining our efforts in this initiative, and also to Florentin, the chair of the Swiss Securities Post-Trade Council, for joining us. So let me start by briefly setting the context for this testing plan. The report we are presenting today reflects a joint efforts across EU, UK, and Switzerland. Don't forget that we have also our Swiss colleagues on board on this exercise. And it's built on a shared recognition that our markets are deeply interconnected and that a fragmented approach to testing would have not been effective. Instead, we have aimed to provide a coordinated pan-European framework, allowing market participants to organize themselves as a part of a single global ecosystem, rather than navigating three parallel and potentially inconsistent approaches. The task force has also taken a particular care to ensure that the plan reflects the needs of the entire settlement chain. The Testing Task Force has brought together a broad range of stakeholders, asset managers, brokers, custodians, FMIs, associations, and public authorities, so that the framework is both inclusive and operationally relevant for all the constituencies. And finally, let me highlight also that a key design principle of this plan is pragmatism and flexibility. We recognize that each firm's testing needs will be different. European market structure is complex and heterogeneous, and full end-to-end testing may not always be feasible in all cases. Three key messages underpin the plan. And sorry for repeating what has been already said in previous panel, but as we in Latin say, repetita juvent, repeating helps. First, automation is a critical success factor. The move to T+1 requires firms to significantly upscale their processes, reduce manual intervention, and operate in a much tighter time frame. And again, based on the results of the survey, the 57% who will be ready only by the end of 2027, let me recall that automation of allocation and confirmation process is essential, as these steps sit at the heart of the post-trading life cycle and are often a source of delay and operational friction. Achieving high levels of same-day allocation and confirmation will be a key determinant of the overall settlement efficiency under T+1. Second, firm readiness depends on the readiness of the entire settlement chain. No firm operates in isolation. The ability to settle on T+1 depends on the weakest link in the chain, from execution through allocation, confirmation, instruction, and settlement, making coordination and alignment across stakeholders essential. And third, as mentioned by Andrew and discussed also in the previous panel, and perhaps most importantly, start now. Many testing environments are already available today, and firms should not wait for formal testing windows to begin their preparation. However, probably it's important to reinforce what starting now really means. T+1 is a transformational project. T+1 is not simply about automating existing processes or complying with regulatory requirements. It requires a fundamental reshape of the post-trade landscape, with the full transaction cycle being compressed by up to 80% compared to today's timeline. This transformation, of course, is reflected also in our more than 30 recommendations outlined in the high-level roadmap, which call for deep operational, technological, and behavioral changes across the industry. It is also equally important to emphasize the need to test and adapt settlement efficiency tools at scale. Solutions as auto-partial settlement, hold and release mechanism, and automated buyer protection will play a critical role in optimizing settlement outcomes and maintaining high level of settlement efficiency in a T+1 environment. These tools are not optional enhancement. They are becoming core components of the settlement process, and their effective use should be fully integrated into firms' testing strategies. This is also why this plan is not just about testing, but is about de-risking the transition. To this extent, the report provides key metrics and benchmarks that firms can use to assess their readiness, identify gaps, and monitoring progress over time. Testing should therefore be seen as a part of a broader effort to ensure that firms are not only compliant, but operationally ready to perform under T+1 condition. So, in summary, this testing plan is designed to support the industry in moving from preparation to execution and from execution to confidence in delivery. My final message is very simple. Start early, automate deeply, test broadly, and work collectively to de-risk the transition. Thank you.
We still have a little bit of time left, so let's start the discussion with a short summary of today's event. So what we understood that all of us, we need to climb a mountain. We have quite similar journey and we know where we need to go to, but we have a different path and we have different dependencies, risks and gaps that we need to achieve and fully align on. Key topics and key themes are: we are in the same ecosystem. We need to establish a clear and transparent communication. We need to understand establish a clear planning and the clear market dependencies, deadlines, risk, de-risk, and gaps as well. What we want to achieve in this panel is talking to someone who already climbed the mountain and understands the challenges that are ahead of us, who has worked on the metrics and can explain what we need to do. So in the next panel, we will deep dive in changing the perspective from a CSD, from investor, but also from an expert on the testing metrics. Let's start with the first question and maybe with the first perspective. As US already went live with T+1, how did you perceive, your firm perceive the specific impact on US going live with T+1? And what do you think are the biggest impacts on the European but also on the UK area? Alex, do you want to start?
Sure, and I mean, obviously looking at me, I've never climbed a mountain, so thanks for that. And at the outset, I'd just like to say it's been a pleasure working with my co-leads Ivan and Charlie, even if I've probably inherited some of their grey hairs from the start of this. Indeed, so when we looked at US T+1, I was working for the Investment Association, a trade body covering UK asset managers. And of course, the US very much impacted the buy-side firms based in Europe, as they're very heavily invested there. I think one of the key questions, which probably we spent more time than we'd like on, is education. So trying to understand what affirmation was, and I think that bounced around, Susan's nodding, a couple of months, and understanding the ability to perform non-T+1 trades. So I think that education piece here is key for the UK and EU, and I think most of the recommendations and rules are known. When you talk to things like the gating event and you speak to certain buy-side firms, I think they're not going to know it exists, let alone some of the specifications around it. So we really need to work on that education piece as one of the priorities.
Chiara, what do you think from investor perspective? What would make sense to look at?
So first of all, thank you for having me this afternoon. So from a broker standpoint, We did a lot of analysis ahead of the US T+1 to identify our gaps, where our weaknesses were, and that analysis that I think was mentioned by Giovanni and in the previous panels was very, very useful to ensure a smooth transition. For my firm, it was very successful, and I think the open conversation and communication that we had with our clients, the fact that we partner with them, not only with our clients, but also with our clearing and all counterparts involved in the US T+1 transition was fundamental for us to ensure that everything was smooth, it went well. But I think, as I was saying, an internal analysis, a gap analysis, automations, and communication were key factor to ensure a good US T+1 transition.
Charlie, your perspective from CSD?
Yeah, it might sound a bit odd. By the way, sorry, it's me again. It might sound a bit odd to have a CSD saying how did US T+1 affect you, but we've got a link with the DTCC, and there's an active market in US securities in the UK which we can settle, and there I mean immediately the time zone is far bigger than even than anything between us and the EU. So from there it was effectively echoing what Alex and Chiara have said, communicating with our clients and how can we assist our clients to continue to benefit from having US securities settling in the UK, but also recognising that when they wish to move cross-border, etc., they're going to have to comply with T+1. And so therefore, it was a lot of communication with our clients, understanding what we needed to do and what they needed, what we could provide them with. And as we came through it, we've now got maintained an active market in US securities in the UK, and they are moving securities cross-border and achieving T+1 out in the US. So I think as an end game, that was a very good response, but it really was communication and working with our clients.
So it's really defining a joint path, really transparent communication, and really a joint journey that we need to go and that we need to achieve. If we can talk about the most relevant topic besides of transparency with regards to getting ready for UK and European transition, what would you say are the topics and the themes that we need to consider as well? Charlie, do you want to give it a go?
Yeah, certainly. I think and it's been said a lot today, but people look at the operations, and I dare say, I'm going to say everybody here is in operations, everybody who's watching is probably in operations, but it's going to affect everything from post-trade, so as soon as the trade's done. And it's very easy to forget the things early in the life cycle of a transaction and concentrate on have I got the SSIs, have I got the allocations, etc., which has been discussed. But if you haven't got a system that can sort of calculate ready for tomorrow in real time what your funding position is going to be and potentially what your settlement position is required, then at the very first hurdle, you're building up a problem that's going to occur and will end up with the CSD, myself, going, sorry, you haven't got enough stock or you haven't got enough money. And so it's very easy to look at, sort of, shall we say, operations, but I think some of the areas that perhaps will provide the most benefit is looking at the immediate post-trade, perhaps the middle office type thing, where the calculations that are being pumped down are going to benefit.
Alex, your view on the approach?
With the US?
With the US.
Yes, indeed. So, I mean, as Charlie said, every team is impacted internally. I think that's no surprise. There's also no surprise if we say, of course, it's the whole ecosystem, as has been echoed on the other panels. So I think for firms, it is incumbent to know what do they intend to test themselves. And as we think to the UK and Europe, I don't think any firm is direct against all of the different markets. So there'll be some cases where you have a settlement agent where you're asking yourself, are you going to test with them? Or are you happy that they've tested against the market? And how are you satisfied that they're ready for T+1? And I think that dependency and reliance goes up the chain. Like, are you happy the CSD has tested appropriately with the CCP, even if you don't see any of those tests yourself. So it's about doing that due diligence between entities as well.
If we're looking at the investor perspective, if we're looking about industry coordination or related topics that were relevant for DTCC testing, what is your view on this topic?
I think I echo what Charlie and Alex said, and especially the transitions in the US to T+1 is demonstrating that those firms who invested in real-time systems and in automation have gained, competitiveness against their peers. So they become the go-to firms for investors. I think, one lesson that we also learned from the US and that can be applied to the transition in Switzerland, the EU and UK is that firms need also to review their global footprint where possible. They need to look at where their operation teams are based and implement a follow-the-sun model. Although we all know, having been in this industry for so long, that it's easier said than done. It's not that easy to implement a true follow-the-sun model. But these are all lessons from the US that can be thought and taken for the implementation next year of our transition to T1. And the DTCC was very good in terms of the testing. All of us had a number of weeks. I think there were 21 bi-weekly tests available for all of us. So the testing was crucial, was fundamental to ensure a smooth transition. And that's why we're here today to say that even for the EU, UK and Switzerland, it's critical that we all start testing now.
Amazing. We described a joint path, we described a joint communication, the transparent communication, the tools, so we know how to get them there. Let's deep dive a little and talk about the topics around securities lending and corporate action. What is most relevant for EU and UK areas? Charlie?
Well, in the report, we've tried to make it as straightforward as possible. These are very complex areas, and I'm in no way an expert in either of them, actually. But when we look at the corporate actions, we've really gone down to what are the building blocks. And so, we're looking, and the tests we've suggested are related to, the most common, so a cash distribution and a stock distribution. And they are, in a way, the ones that are also going to be impacted by the reduction or the record date and ex-date merging and knock-on claims creation. And then also an open transaction that eventually will be transformed. And the view is that whilst there are three separate things, and I know somebody put a hand up, but what about a tender offer, or what about this particular... Most corporate actions are constructed of at least one or more of those particular items. And so in order to make sure that we can test corporate action sufficiently, but also in a sensible frame, we've suggested those three particular core things, because they're the ones that are coming up, they come up week after week. When it comes to securities lending, as I said earlier in the previous panel, you're all different. You're all the same, you're all investment firms, but you're all doing things differently. And there we've worked very closely with ISLA, and I'd like to call out Tony Holland for his staunch efforts with ISLA. They've worked really hard on producing effectively a menu of things that if you are in that industry, you should be looking at. And on that, they're looking at all sorts of the different requirements regarding recalls and such like, and also how the industry works. And from that menu, you can pick and choose. I do that. And there are suggestions, things you might like to test. From an industry document, it's very much more of we recognise this is an important area, but it's far more complex than we can actually put into a single document. There is a direct link into ISLA for you to look there, because they're the experts and they're the people who understand what all parts of the lending industry are doing.
Yeah, I think just on that, so when we engaged with the US, so we did speak to SIFMA and Deloitte, and DTC were part of our group. as well. We have followed a very similar principle that testing environments are generally free form and left to firms to decide. One of the angles the US did take was corporate actions needs more assistance to set up those test scenarios. So we've followed that as well. I think one other thing to point out is there's the ECB harmonization report looking at corporate actions where they're trying to harmonize many of those processes. So if we do see those markets look to converge, there may be changes in individual markets which firms will need to be aware of across the European markets and have to test as well. So to be seen on how that interacts, but important to note as well.
That's a really interesting topic. Let's deep dive and let's keep it for a moment. If we're looking into the testing and the testing themes, processes, what would you, from your perspective, prioritize by talking about testing, talking about some specific relevant themes?
Sure. So what I would say is it's early days, and of course, everyone's testing journey will be different and contingent on that firm. I think we made it very clear in the first panel, and we'll say the same here. So we can't say that you must test auto partial first or regression test is number one. It's going to be different across the board, although, of course, myself and Chiara can share some ideas, but of course, it's going to be completely different to all firms. I think probably for European testing, as I alluded to with the corporate action changes, it will be important to track each of the individual markets and how they're changing. So the operational day we know is changing across T2S markets. How are each CSD going to reflect that through the chain, the gating event, and then even then we know Switzerland are talking about auto partial settlement. How do we fit that in? So kind of building that map across the different markets of what are the individual changes that we need to track. So there's kind of the individual market perspective and then the industry perspective of the gating event, the operational day, what changes are there going to be across the board that we need to track as well. And I think I'd just stress one more point. Our report goes very much into entity-to-entity testing. We decided not to focus on internal testing because it's a huge universe. Every firm, once again, is different. But of course, there will be lots of internal testing to track too. I think especially testing can start now is very much on that angle as well. We're starting to test some of our own builds internally within the next quarter. So, sure.
Yeah, I would say in an ideal world we will be able to test, everything front to back. But exactly like Giovanni said, it's not possible sometimes. So we need to understand, each firm needs to understand what they need to test first. I will say from, my point of view, it's very important to start with the allocation process where everything generates from the post-executions. Then, Alex and Charlie may decide that for them it will be beneficial to test something else initially. I think, we all need to perform this gap analysis that I was mentioning before. It's very important to understand what our weaknesses are and where we will start to test, and also with which counterparts. We may have, the larger, for instance, investors and asset managers that are more sophisticated and they are ready to go live maybe tomorrow, hopefully, on T+1. But what about the small boutique firms, the small investors, the more manual ones? And also, we need to look at global investors. So not only to focus on, European, UK investors, but what about investors, for instance, in Asia, in the US? So those times when they are more impacted by the transition. And I think this is where, we should also collaboratively help everyone in our firms and in our industry to achieve a collectively smooth transition to T1. So I would say from my side, do an analysis, an internal analysis, and although we would like to test everything in a perfect scenario, we know that it's not possible, so let's try to test where our weaknesses are to then be as ready as possible.
Thank you, Chiara. So we already described the journey. We understand we want to go to the top of the mountain and stay above the sky and the clouds. let's talk about the metrics, the map, how we can get there. Alex, from your view, you're the expert on this topic. Can you shortly describe the map?
It's all yours. Probably a bit too much overhype there. So, no, indeed. So quite early on in some of the testing groups, there was a lot of focus from all of the firms to say, testing isn't the start or the end to say you've completed T+1, all successful tests. By the time we go live on the 11th of October 2027, we're done. We'll get a successful transition. We do testing, we're fine. Quite a lot of the feedback was from firms, and my own view as well is there's so many steps you can take internally that don't require industry testing that will improve your readiness. So when we think to the recommendations across the EU report, the UK report, things like adopting auto-partial, these are available in most large markets now, hold and partial release, looking at some of your timings around allocations, confirmations, settlement instructions. These are all things you can either opt into today or you can achieve today. So most firms will send a degree of their settlement instructions on trade day, on today, but there will be a tail after that. So what we discussed as a group was looking at de-risking the transition. So if you take some of these steps, you comply to these recommendations, you do a gap analysis internally, how is that evidenced? And as James alluded to earlier, we came up with 4 key metrics that a firm can use to track their readiness for T+1. And I think even if we weren't moving to T+1, these are very useful to look at anyway. And in publishing these metrics, we're encouraging firms to do a few things. So having a look today, and I always phrase this wrong, so I'm going to look at my notes. In a T+1 world, how do you achieve by trade date what you currently achieve by trade date +1 today? So if T+1 went live tomorrow, what's your instruction input timing by end of day on T? So very much encouraging firms to look at that. Seeing how they compare to industry. So am I behind the general curve or am I in a good place? Even if I'm in a good place, I know there's work to do. And then to some of the RTS points discussed earlier, we know there's a requirement to send allocations and confirmations by 11, settlement instructions by 2359, it's in the RTS. So how do we strive towards 100% there such that we can evidence that we've looked to comply with that, even if we know there'll be a couple of situations where that may be very challenging to do. So for that, we've come up with 4 key metrics, as James alluded to earlier, which should be a surprise to no one. Allocations and confirmations, and please flash it up, I'll need to explain it a little bit too. Allocations and confirmations by 11 o'clock. Settlement instructions, so the time at which a counterpart instructs into market. The matching rates against the counterparty, and this isn't in the recommendations, but it's obviously a key metric. And this settlement efficiency rate. So I know on the screen we have some figures and some are TBC. So we're working with the CSD community, very helpfully with Exeter through Gregory. And by the time Frankfurt, the 21st of April comes around, we should have a cross-Europe view. These are just UK September 2025 metrics. Even then, December's available as well, Charlie. So we should have a cross-Europe view. And it's just very much encouraging firms, look at those blank spaces. Where do you compare to industry? And just where do you compare to yourself? So what you achieved by T+1 today to settle T+2. What would it look like if you transition tomorrow? How can you do a gap analysis to bring those metrics up? So I'll leave it there. I know Charlie's done a lot of good work, and as JP Morgan, we've been chasing him on these metrics
yes,
as
we've
well.
had some lovely discussions, haven't we? No, very important in moving them forward because the figures that are up there at the moment, they're market-wide, and we're publishing them on our own website, but also on the AST website. As Alex said, we've now got up to December 2025, and I would expect in probably the next month or so we'll have the first quarter of 2026. But these are market-wide, and when you look, I mean, I've looked at the client figures, and I would say from a UK perspective, The FCA are very interested in these figures and using these metrics as a measurement to understand where the market's moving, or the market is moving rather, but also at a firm level. And so we will be providing those at a firm level to the FCA, and we're also looking to be able to provide that to clients to subscribe to, so that they know what we're seeing and they also know what we're showing the FCA sort of thing. But when you look at those figures from a firm's perspective and looking at individual firms, there's a lot in the 100% or the very high 90s. And then other parts of the same firm can be 30 or 40% lower. Now, I suspect it's because that particular part of the firm does a particular type of business. And it's by using these metrics, but also looking internally at your own individual metrics by particular business lines, etc., that you realise where the hotspots are, the things that really need to be addressed. Because if we can bring those particular parts of the business up, then these figures will move and everybody will be able to achieve a T+1. So I think it's a really strong tool. And also, it's sort of, it sounds terrible, it could be that you don't need to test anything. You can do internal change and see these metrics change and achieve the necessary, be achieving T+1 metrics, should we call it, T+1 throughputs. And actually the amount of testing you need to do with any particular environment or any particular FMI or anything could be actually particularly, maybe significantly reduced, because you can see, I'm already doing it. I'm going, by internal change, by internal process change, I am moving these things through. I'm not saying that everybody's going to get away with that, and I know people are going to come to us and want to test, and we will all, the CSDs will be there available for testing. But don't come into this thinking, I have to test with, as I said, everything everywhere all at once. By the use of metrics and the internal changes and perhaps internal testing, by using these, it can actually be a very useful tool to, shall we say, avoid some of the big, what people go into thinking, oh my goodness, I've got to do all of this testing.
That's great. We discussed the best case scenario where somebody is really using the metrics and don't need to test. Let's focus on the challenges and the risk. So the other way around. From your point of view, let's start with Alex. What are the major challenges and what are the major risks, as we discussed before, to achieve T+1 readiness and to be successful in testing?
Sure. So, broken record, every firm will be different. Just leave that there. I think that the risks, therefore, will be different per those different firm types. So, as a larger firm, who are probably direct in more of these markets where you may need to test, there's a lot of logistical and operational challenges to testing, which I know with Giovanni we're discussing governance around testing across countries as well. But if you are active in 10, 20 markets, what are all the static data instruments you might need to test? How do you access that? How are all of the different markets aligned in their testing windows? Have they adopted our 5 specific windows that we think they will? And hopefully the answer is yes. And then with that as well, how do you engage probably quite a large client base in getting ready? I know we just spoke to metrics as well. There'll be, some of your clients will be in quite a good place. Some might need more help. So how do you adapt your client engagement plan there? And then probably for a smaller firm, as I alluded to earlier, you may not be direct to an FMI, and looking at the US testing discussion we had earlier, when I was at the IA, I know quite a few asset managers tested that affirmation process with the DTC, but they didn't necessarily test against their custodians, broker-dealers on a large scale, maybe 1 or 2. So for them, it was around making sure they were comfortable that their key stakeholders had tested. So it's due diligence as much as testing, if that makes sense. But we'll see what the appetite's like with some of these European transitions.
That's quite an interesting perspective. Chiara, from your point of view, major challenges and risks?
I think the main challenge is probably the fragmentations that we see, especially in the EU and with all the different legislation and markets. That's why I think using these key metrics is very, very important. They are a very powerful tool for all of us to even secure budget or identify which counterparts we need to test with. And also we should try and leverage, our friendly clients and counterparts when we've got the strongest relationship to try and overcome this fragmentation and sometimes this overwhelming number of testing that we think we may need to do. So it goes down again to the analysis, to the metrics. The numbers are very, very important. They are very powerful, and it's key for each firm to know where they are against the industry, but against their peers, and try to, with these numbers, to help themselves to overcome the fragmentation and sometimes also the daunting number of testing that they think initially they need to do.
For a CSD, or from a CSD perspective, major challenges and risk from your side as well?
I think I'm not saying the UK is without risk, but I think there's bigger risk, shall we say, over in the EU with the number of FMIs that are involved and the big change in relation to the operational day, and that I think there's a lot of the risk can be mitigated by speaking to your CSD, your FMI, and having an active conversation with them about when things are coming in, because lots of them are going to have different changes to make and they're going to just come in at different times because of the amount of IT change, should we say, or just when the releases are coming in. So I think certainly engage with the FMIs, but as Alex said, it affects everybody on the chain, and there are going to be people who are affected that never touch an FMI because they're going through intermediaries, and therefore speaking to your intermediary. I think it's been said a number of times, the weakest link in the chain, don't be that weakest link, because if you're only going to work to deadlines, then, as I said in the previous panel, you're going to stiff somebody further up. It won't be you, it won't be probably the person next down the chain, but somewhere along the chain, I'm pretty certain somebody's going to be left holding the baby. And therefore, communicating and understanding what changes are happening for the particular markets that you're in is I think, most important.
Just a really short one. The next smartest move between now and the next milestone, from your point of view, Charlie, do you want to start?
I think it's going to be doing from the test plan. There's a lot of work you can already start doing. We've given you suggestions, and when it comes to like transaction types and the metrics, there's a lot of work you can already start doing and start considering where, as Chiara was saying, what the gap analysis is, and that is, I think, going to get you streets ahead when it comes to towards the end of the year. Understanding exactly what you need to test, etc.
I echo Charlie with the gap analysis, but I will say also engage with your clients, engage with your counterparty. The more you talk to them, the more you partner with them, I think the easier the transition will be. And the more we talk with clients, the more we see that, we can help each other, or there's parts within the post-execution flow that we need to improve, and that is critical. And open communication, as it happened in the US, needs to happen for the EU, the UK, and Switzerland.
Alex?
I'm the expert, so I'll just reiterate. Just source these metrics, as hopefully you have them internally, but you may need help from your partners. Have a look and perform a gap analysis, and this will tell you where your deficiencies are. So if you're high on instruction input timing, but your matching rate is low, you've probably got an SSI exchange issue, or you may need to speak to your counterparty if they're not inputting on time. So I think these will really tell you where your deficiencies are. And then at an industry level, we want to see these numbers go up. So it's incumbent on us as a group to take a collective responsibility for these metrics and hopefully see them rise as well. So yes, leave it there.
As we described the journey, as we described how to come there, how to be there, any questions that we didn't touch and that we should mention in this group as well? I see one.
Yeah, so that everybody else who aren't in
We can repeat your question if you ask it.
No, give her the glory.
So nobody will be surprised about this question because I ask it regularly, but I really feel that from the testing workstream that we need to get specific ISINs for testing so that the UAT environments to test in have all the reference data set up. And I think it's really key that the industry is testing the same securities.
Indeed. It's a point that's come up a lot, Victoria, so thanks for asking, and very pertinent as well. So I think, as I alluded to, this is something we're discussing with Giovanni about how we'd approach this. Obviously, in the US, it was kind of easier. It's one single market, so they can deliver that static data quite straightforwardly. For us, and especially a big institution like yourselves, having to track all of those different markets will be a challenge in terms of those different data points and the timings they're delivering. We're looking at some sort of governance structure that will span across the various different markets. We know that could be a challenge operationally, so there's a few caveats, but it's being discussed at the industry committee with probably the opening discussion earlier this week. So I think more to come on this. We understand the need for sure, and we've drafted what a so-called job specification might look like for anyone who takes on this function. But it's also quite challenging, as I'm sure you'd understand, to coordinate across all these different markets as well, in terms of who can do it and how they do it.
Thank you, Alex.
Hi, I'm Tina from Deutsche. I really love the metrics idea, and especially comparing our metrics to the industry-wide metrics. Are you thinking of breaking it out to a market or CSD level so we can kind of do that deeper comparison? Because it's quite wide to say EU, UK, and Switzerland all together.
Yeah, so I think the decision we made as part of the testing task force is to keep it super high levels such that it's applicable to counterparties of all size. So of course, we know that some firms may want to break it per market, per instrument type. I know we've got equities and fixed income there. Do you want to split corporate and sovereign, ETFs, etc.? We decided to keep it aggregate and straightforward so that even probably the smallest firms who we've heard are the biggest focus or concern can apply to this. I think if we did want to split per market, that's a conversation we'd have to have with Giovanni and Exeter as to what's possible and how easy that would be to disseminate. Because I think from experience, even coordinating for hopefully what will come in the 21st of April has been quite challenging as well. But even with everyone being very much on board and looking to move towards it, it would have been amazing to have it here. But yeah, hopefully we'll have it April and we'll see what's possible thereafter. I'm not making any promises.
I completely understand that point. I think it's just when we do our own comparisons, it'd be easier to see kind of if we're seeing problems in specific places or whether that's an industry-wide thing or our own, right?
Yeah.
But I think you probably get that point, so I'm not going to put you on the spot any longer.
So I'm sure the CSDs and probably the NCAs in those regions have that view as well. And I'm sure you as a firm and we as a firm have our own stats around which markets we've got a higher settlement efficiency rate versus lower. It is useful to see that against the market average, but I think that's something we'll have to discuss to see how accessible that is, because these data and metrics and
Thank you.
Thank you.
The UK will be separate.
So the road is clear, and one of the last sentences was the time is ticking, so we need to start now.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sorry.
There's one additional.
No, I'd just say, so we do have the follow-up event on the 21st of April. We've published the report today, and we hope firms are going to digest it and come up with either, well, hopefully answers rather than questions. But the idea is that that event is, it'll cover some of the same topics, but it'll also build on it. So please feed in your questions into that report such that we can tailor the content to hopefully respond to some of the thoughts around the report. So I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Great. So thank you all very much. Thank you to these panelists and to all our panelists and speakers today. I'm now in the invidious position of standing between everyone and a drink and something to eat. So I'm going to be very snappy. Look, I won't delay you. I think the message is clear from everyone and from all the panels in terms of the need to get on with this. I guess the challenge is obviously that you guys are the guys who already are focused on this because you're at an event discussing this, and all the people online have sat listening to this patiently for several hours this afternoon. So you guys are focused on this. So I guess the meta message is evangelize and be making sure that you're working with your clients and counterparties and people across the market who maybe aren't as plugged in, that this is important, this is real, and that there are benefits but also risks. So people need to get on with it and focus on this. As Alex said, the report is now out, the test strategy. A huge amount of work's gone into that. I commend it to you. Do obviously read it and engage with it, and feedback to the group as you come up with further thoughts. But I think that's definitely an important thing to do. Thank you very much for coming. We can now go, and there should be something to eat and drink outside. Natalie's nodding at me. Thank you very much. See you on the road.